Welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series, your resource for the latest news and updates on pressing issues facing the accounting profession.
Good afternoon. I'm Eric Auskerson, one of your hosts for today. We've got a power hour in store for you. We're going to be discussing quite a bit. We're going to kick things off with our DC and profession update. A lot going on in DC. A large bill just introduced by the Republicans related to the debt limit. Hearings with the new IRS commissioner, the SEC commissioner. We'll be covering those. We're then going to do a scan of the profession in advisory services strategies with Mark Koziel, who many of you know from the early days of the town hall. So look forward to introducing him. Lisa is going to be providing the technical updates. And then Lisa and I are going to be getting into a discussion on ChatGPT with Jason Statz, who's a subject matter expert in that area and a CPA. We'll be talking about the role of accounting and finance related to these AI developments. And then we'll be closing with the open forum. So I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. Here's the lineup for today. So let's get right into it. Let's bring Rachel Dresden up, who you all know is one of the leaders of the AICPA advocacy group. And Rachel, Congress is back. They took their 2-week spring break, and the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, he was actually here in New York this week at the New York Stock Exchange, announcing this big bill related to the debt limit, which dropped today, all 330 pages of it. So welcome, and provide us the latest on what's happening.
Thank you. Yes, you're right. They came back from their spring break with a bang with this big new debt limit bill that they unveiled, and they're calling it the Limit Save Grow Act, and it has 3 different components to it. And the first component is on limiting spending. It would limit discretionary spending levels for FY 2024 to FY 22 levels, as well as it would cap future spending for the next 2 years at a growth of only 1%. So that's the limit component of it. And then there's the save component, which prohibits the federal student loan forgiveness, and it also repeals back any of the unspent funding for the IRS, the $80 billion that was appropriated under the Inflation Reduction Act. It would take back that remaining funding, and there's about $71 billion left in there, as well as it would prohibit green tax credits that were a part of the IRA. And for the grow component of the legislation, it would increase domestic energy production, as well as it would require some work requirements to welfare programs. And the last component is, it's called the RAINS Act. And what the RAINS Act does is it requires Congress to approve any regulation that comes out of an agency that costs over $100 million. It would then have to have congressional approval. So those are the components of the Limit Save Grow Act. But as it relates to the actual debt limit, it increases the debt limit by $1.5 trillion or until March of next year, whichever one comes first. So that's the bill that that Republicans in the House have unveiled. And the question right now, though, is whether or not they can get 218 votes. As you know, and we've talked about before on the town hall, the Republicans have a very narrow majority in the House, and they can only lose 4 of their members from voting from this bill because they don't expect any Democrat to vote for it. So the expectation is that they will try to bring this to the House floor sometime next week, probably mid next week. And if they are able to do so, then it really will help them to gain leverage in the negotiations with the Democrats. Because right now, the Democrats have said that they will not negotiate on the debt limit, that any increase of the debt limit must come without any preconditions. It must be a clean increase. and that they won't engage in any negotiations, which right now, given the fact that it is a divided Congress in DC, Republicans and Democrats are going to have to come together on something, because whatever moves is going to have to be bipartisan. And we've talked about this before when, X date will be. X date is the date of potential default on the debt. And right now, the early predictions were June, and then CBO came out and said, might be July or as late as September. Well, Goldman Sachs earlier this week sent a note out saying that the X date could actually occur a little bit earlier, given the fact that tax receipts were down from what they're seeing. Ultimately, the only one that can decide when X date is Secretary Yellen, and we could see her coming out with something sometime next week, given that April 18th has happened, given that April 15th was actual April 18th this year was tax day. And looking at the receipts that came in, we may have a better idea of when X date actually will occur. But there's a lot going on in DC now related to the debt limit.
Well, it seems like the poker match has started. The Republicans have, played their cards here, all 330 pages of it. And we're going to, hear a lot more about this as we get closer and closer to that actual date, whenever it may be. But as you just, in your summary here, it sounds like the big next step here is, can McCarthy, the House leader, get his 218 Republicans all in line with this bill? Because there's already a couple that have not have come out saying they're not sure if they're going to support that. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. There are two that have publicly said that they have some concerns, which is, we'll see how this goes, whether or not they change their minds or if any others start to raise concerns. But should Republicans be able to pass this in the House, it really will help them to jumpstart what they want to have for negotiations. But if they're not able to do this next week, then that will really help Democrats in the negotiations say, hey, you guys don't even have the votes to pass your own bill. So that's why you need to just do a clean bill for raising the debt ceiling.
So maybe just a couple of highlights here on the Gensler and Werfel hearings that are kind of relevant for the town hall community.
Yeah, so we had, two big administration officials up on the Hill this week. On Tuesday, Commissioner Gensler was testifying before the House Financial Services Committee. And throughout the hearing, the two big issues that were raised were crypto and ESG. And on the crypto issues, Republicans really focused on trying to get clarity on the classification of crypto assets as a security. And Democrats were focusing whether or not the SEC has the necessary authority to regulate the crypto market and bring it into compliance. So that was a main theme. And then the other one on ESG was really focused on the SEC's climate disclosure proposal that they came out with last year. We've talked about this before on the town hall. It's a very, very partisan issue. You didn't see a single Democrat who spoke unfavorably about the climate proposal at the hearing, and you also didn't see a single Republican speak favorably for it. They're pretty divided on it. Scope 3 was a big issue that came up. A couple of Democrats weighed in suggesting that the SEC should go a little bit further on Scope 3. And Republicans on Scope 3, they oppose it. They oppose the climate disclosure outright, but especially on the Scope 3 issue. So it really wasn't a surprise on that front from both Republicans and Democrats on the ESG and the climate disclosure. But then with Commissioner Werfel, this was his first hearing since being sworn in as the IRS commissioner. So he was before the Senate Finance Committee yesterday. And it was very similar to his confirmation hearing back in February a lot of the same themes and a lot of similar questions from that hearing. A lot of focus on the $80 billion that the Congress appropriated to the IRS under the Inflation Reduction Act. Democrats spoke favorably about it and that it's helping to improve taxpayer service. And there were Republicans who had concerns that the enforcement piece of that will impact those making under $400,000 a year. But it was interesting that it was brought up during the hearing, a concern that the AICPA, that we have also raised, that of the $80 billion, only 4% of that is going towards taxpayer services, and that more needs to be focused on taxpayer services. So not a lot of surprises for either the hearing with Commissioner Gensler or with Commissioner Warfel.
Well, we'll continue to watch it. And you and I were talking earlier that the SEC, disclosure rule related to the climate most likely will happen this year. It's just a question of when. And right now it looks like maybe later in the year. But as we know in Washington, D.C., nothing happens till it does happen. Then it happens all of a sudden. So we'll stay close to that one. Here's another development related to the 1099K threshold issue.
Yes. So House Republicans sent a letter to the GAO related to the change in the 1099K threshold, which, as many will recall, in the American Rescue Plan, it was changed from $20,000 to $600 or 200 transactions to just a single transaction. And the letter, it was asking the GAO whether or not, with the 4.7 billion information returns that the IRS received in 2021, if they're even able to handle all of those. And with this new change of lowering the threshold, whether or not this will add, billions of new returns, whether or not the IRS will be able to handle that. And this 1099K issue is one that Congress is keenly aware of. That it was one of the issues that came up during the hearing with Commissioner Warfel yesterday. A question was asked that if the threshold were to be increased from that current $600, if that would help make it easier to administer for the IRS. And Commissioner Warfel said yes, it would, if they were to increase that. So this is something that House and Senate Republicans and Democrats are very interested in.
Well, just to close up here, I know this is just something we want to make people aware of, this AICPA comment letter on the FTC non-competes.
Yep. So we've talked about this before. I think Barry discussed the non-compete issue at a previous town hall. The FTC came out with a proposed rule back in January that was very broad and would apply to both existing and future non-competes. There was a comment period that ended just yesterday. The AICPA submitted a comment letter, and in the comment letter, we really focused on the work that CPAs do that is critical to the economy and to the capital markets, and how the proposed rule, we believe, lacks the FTC lacks the authority, and that it doesn't have the constitutional authority to do so, and is very broad. And it might be appropriate for some lower wage workers, but it's not appropriate for everyone. And at a very, very minimum, if they decide to proceed with this, that they should exempt partners or owners from this. And this is an issue that's gotten a lot of attention. You'll recall President Biden mentioned this in his State of the Union address. And as of yesterday morning, there are 25,000 comments to this proposed rule. So they will have to go through all of those, and then whatever they end up coming out with, there's sure to be litigation.
25,000 comments. That beat the SEC disclosure comment input by 10,000. I think there was around 14,000 there. Yep. So, well, Rachel, thank you. We'll bring you back up for open forum. I'm sure there's going to be questions related to what we just covered. Now, I would like to bring up both Mark Koziel and Lisa Simpson. So, Lisa, great to see you. And I know we're both looking forward to this segment with our old friend and current friend, obviously, Mark Koziel. As many of you know, Mark Koziel was an executive at the AICPA for many, many years. He left in the middle of 2020 to become the president and CEO of Millennial Global. So we've got a number of topics that Lisa and I are going to discuss with him. I think we can drop the slides here and kick this discussion off with you, Mark. First off, we've been talking about our build up to the 100th town hall. You were there at the start with Lisa and I in April of 2020, a defining time. It was great doing all of those early town halls with you. It's great doing number 97. So just some thoughts on kind of what's going on with you and just our town hall community.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you and Lisa have done to really kind of grow this community. And you think about what we were first trying to accomplish. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. You had the Treasury Department and you had the Small Business Administration trying to figure out what PPP was going to look like and all these programs. And the best thing that we thought of doing was, in fact, reaching out to our members and at least telling them what we knew and, more importantly, what we didn't know. And a lot of the speculation that was out there, just trying to kind of regulate the anxiety that was happening inside the profession. And I do think coming out, reflecting on that, seeing where you've been and where our profession is today, there was not a better time to prove the fact that we as CPAs are the trusted advisor for our clients. We really navigated and helped our clients get through that. I don't know that the government has appreciated as much of what the CPAs did during that time, but I do think that gave us some political capital for Rachel and Mark's team to be able to navigate in Washington. And I think we need to promote that as a profession in total. So, just really great to see where it's at today. Great place to get the most current of information as it happens on a regular basis.
Well, thanks, Mark. And that's what we try to do. Just bring the, best available information that we have at the current moment, dissect it, provide strategies, discuss, capabilities for firms as well as members in business and finance. So why don't we, kick things off with you and have you share a little bit about, what is Millennial Global? What are these, large firm networking groups, associations, or just, what the importance? I mean, we do have the AICPA, but there's an important role that, firm networking association and peer groups play in the, success of firms.
Sure. And it's really for firms to be able to compete not only in the local marketplace against larger firms, but then also in the global marketplace. And so Millennial Global, we have 260 firms globally. We have 60 here in the U.S., range in size from 5 million in annual revenues up to now our largest firm is approaching 800 million, probably 900 million by year end. And so we have a diversity of size in who we are. But for many of them, it's being able to not have to go it alone. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the learning, when I was with Lisa at the AICPA, PCPS has their networking groups, small, medium, large size firms. It's tough out there. And to try and go it alone in anything that we do, that's where I think this town hall is so beneficial, the conferences, and you see the meetups and the networking groups. And for us, our firms are able now to compete in a global marketplace. And there are the smallest of companies that are now global inside of what they do. We had, as an example, a U.S. firm that needed ERP and accounting support in 40 countries across the globe for a U.S.-based company that was kind of spun off from another larger company. And it was one of our local firms. It wasn't a big four doing this work. It was one of our local firms that was able to do that. And it was up to us to bring those 40 countries together to be able to make it happen. But then there's learning, there's sharing best practices, all of those pieces, as well as what PCPS has done for years.
Yeah, few themes from the past 3 years are the importance of community and the importance of networking and sharing best practices and ideas. I've said 100 times on this town hall, it takes a village, and that's what PCPS networking groups can provide as well. So we have, as Mark mentioned, firm group sizes based on small, medium, large, but we also have a virtual networking group, and we've launched one with CPA.com focused on client accounting services. So it is a great way to build that community of support and to help leverage the collective insight of this amazing profession.
Well said by both of you. And I see it every day. I mean, firms of all sizes, it's all sizes that benefit from these types of networking groups, larger firms in something like Lennial Global, and many of the smaller firms in the PCPS firm networking group. So Lisa, it's a good segue you provided. We want to talk a little bit about the state of advisory services with Mark. Mark, you're helping out with our CAS Advisory Council. So how are you seeing advisory services in the CAS category right now?
It is completely exploding. Our firms are getting involved more and more in client accounting. And I think if you look at some of the industry verticals, and our firms are figuring it out, and that's part of, like you said, having a community that you and CPA.com and Lisa doing jointly in the CAS community. We have our own client accounting community inside of the Lineal, and they're helping each other with that. And it is really kind of moving up market. It's not about just taking bookkeeping and being able to charge for it monthly. It is true advisory, rolling up into the ultimate advisor for the client and outsourcing 100% of what they do. We're seeing that more and more. Family office now is exploding. We just started a new group on that. Family office mirrors a lot of what client accounting is. They're talking about the tech stack. They're talking about all these things, and they're getting together to be able to help each other navigate what that looks like and become that true advisor for their client.
I'll echo that comment about, growth in family office is something that we're seeing as well. And our PFP section put out some podcasts recently and has some resources if you're interested in that, that service opportunity. Lots of good growth there.
Well, Lisa, we'll be closing this session, and we'll bring up a slide on some resources here related to the client advisory services area. But one thing that you and I and a lot of the kind of leaders at AICPA and CPA.com have realized is that you really need to have a methodology around how you provide your client advisory services. And there's not one size that fits all. These are strategy decisions you need to make for your firm, but you clearly need to think about your specialization. You need to think about your tech stack. You need to think about your ability to scale. If you're a larger firm, you need to think about how you engage the broader partnership group. So a lot is going into this practice. We're advancing this movement called CAS 2.0 because we really want firms to realize the opportunity. We're still in the early stages. We're still in the early stages of what this category means to small businesses in the U.S. and around the world.
And Eric, you talked about the strategy and all the other factors, but staffing is an important consideration. How do you staff appropriately those client accounting and advisory services? So I know that's a hot topic right now.
Yeah, that's so we wanted to talk to Mark about talent, how, it's keeping a lot of firms up at night. So Mark, what's your perspective right now on just managing the talent equation in firms?
Yeah, so we've worked a lot with our member firms, and there's a couple of factors that we've looked at. And, it's a slide that AICPA has produced for a number of years. I used to use it all the time when I was there, talking about the pyramid and the two outside corners being replaced, if you will, of talent rather than it being the hiring at the entry level. We need to look at outsourcing options, and we need to look at technology to replace that. Outsourcing isn't just, people think the minute you say outsourcing that it's offshoring. It's not. It is being able to find someone outside your four walls to get it done, whether it's a sure prep that's here in the U.S. on tax. We're actually working with a number of partners on the gig worker. There's a number of companies out there that are providing gig level workers that can come in and do project based. And maybe it is for the compression area of tax, that we're just going to hire up somebody for a 2-month slot. It's a gig worker. They don't have to be employed by us. The gig worker platform will actually be the employer on that, and being able to bring them in and being able to just relieve the capacity issue and some of that compression issue as much as we possibly can.
Lisa, you think about this all the time.
I was just on a call with some firms, and they were talking about the compression issue and how they're working to resolve it. And there was a conversation about extensions and getting clients to understand that extensions aren't bad, and they were more successful on that this year than they have been in prior years. But they're also working to not adopt the mentality that an extension means we'll get your return done by October 15. So trying to say it's an extension from April 15 to maybe May 15 or June 15, so that we're working on that compression issue, and also trying to find to the point Mark made about gig workers, creating maybe a core group of temporary tax people who are just working on some of the simpler 1040s, as an example. So firms are definitely getting more creative on that staff augmentation and the approaches that they're willing to consider.
Well,
Mark, you're right.
Yeah. So, Mark, one thing that you're talking a lot about with your firms is growth. We've got some headwinds here right now, obviously, with the economy. But thoughts on growth? In private equity, maybe closing with private equity, because your largest firm that is PE backed just announced a merger today as well.
Yeah, they did, and we have actually the largest number of private equity backed firms inside of Allineal Global, and it's on a global scale because we have a number of firms outside the U.S. that are also private equity backed. But I do think that the things have changed, and I think as we have that talent conversation, it's the same concept, that we have more and more of our member firms that have come to us. So we've created a pricing cohort for our member firms to get together and talk about pricing, because we can't price the way that we always did, especially all of a sudden we're using gig workers, we're using technology. How do you price by the hour anymore? You just can't do it. And so we need to make sure that we're extracting value out of our client and being able to help in that conversation and get braver about how we're going to put that together becomes really important. And that is where we're seeing the growth. We've had a lot of firms this year. I got to tell you, we're talking about growth, but we've had a lot of firms that have fired clients this year, more so than ever. And you know what? They actually grew more because they siphoned off the clients that they shouldn't be working on anymore. And they're focusing more back to that advisory conversation. We could be a better advisor for our better clients if we can get rid of the clients that we shouldn't be serving to begin with.
I'll let you take it, Eric.
I think, Lisa, right now, why don't we bring the slides back up and talk a little bit about some of these resources that we're offering. And then we'll definitely, actually, we do not have the resource slide here, so I was wrong.
It might be at the end. I'll make sure we've got time to cover it at the end. I just want to say thank you to Mark for coming in and sharing your firm insights. It's a lot of what I'm hearing with firms across the country and of all sizes. So PCPS will be working on providing business model resources to help firms think about their strategy, resources to help call the client base to get it down to where it needs to be, but also to create the discipline so that you don't just let them back in the door. And then next week, we're going to continue the talent conversation. This isn't a one-time topic for sure. So you'll hear us talking a lot about talent strategies throughout the course of the year. Thank you.
And Mark, we'll bring you back for open forum. I'm going to give you some of the toughest questions, and if you can't answer it, we're talking about ChatGPT. Maybe we'll throw it to ChatGPT. So
as long as it's not, if you could deduct garbage fees as part of the utilities.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll see you in a few minutes, Mark. So Lisa, I will let you take it away.
All right. I'm going to do a somewhat light technical update because I think that's what you guys deserve on April 20th. Thank you for joining us. I did want to call out that there have been some very recent announcements about the tax relief related to disaster across the country. The latest announcement was just 2 days ago about some damages in Indiana. Earlier, we had a report about disaster relief in Tennessee. It's hard to keep up with all of the disaster declarations right now, so I've given you a link. You can download these slides and access that link to go directly to the IRS tax relief and disaster situation page. But we also have a great podcast that I wanted to remind you about with a couple of our practitioners, one of whom has the distinction of being the master of disaster. Not sure I want that nickname, but some great insights in that podcast for you. And a little bit more of a technical topic to talk about, but this is really just highlighting some of the advocacy that we've been doing around digital assets. So we've just submitted a comment letter to the IRS and Treasury April 14th about how to determine the tax treatment of losses on digital assets. It is an 18-page comment letter. It's really fascinating reading and will help you understand some of the more technical nuances around digital assets. So things like NFTs, non-fungible tokens, virtual currency, digital currency, and those kinds of things. As a reminder, the IRS says that is treated as property, not as for a typical type of investment. So it's property, and that creates a lot of challenges that have really come to light over the past 3 months or so with the high-profile bankruptcies of entities like FTX, Celsius, and some of the other digital currency platforms. A lot of good, hard technical questions that we've asked the IRS and Treasury to give guidance back to you and your clients on, so that there's more clarity and that there's more consistency in how things are being treated. So again, a great 18-page letter. I think we may have put the letter in the resources. If not, the link is embedded in the image that you see there. I do want to give a shout out to Annette Nellen, who chairs our virtual currency task force, and Peter Miller on the AICPA team, who have been driving the efforts around this request for clarity. Then just for a little, I'm not going to push you into starting your tax season debrief yet, but we do have a great new podcast out from April Walker talking with Nicole Davis, who's been on the town hall before and has some creative practice management solutions. So download the podcast as you're taking a walk around the lake or hitting the beach, and start getting some ideas for next season. And another shout out, we have some intel that was pointed out on Tax Twitter by Phyllis. So I want to give a thank you to her regarding an update to the ID.me account. So her eagle eye spotted that the IRS has announced that the old process for logging into your account is going away effective May 16, and you will have to sign up for the ID.me account before that date. If you remember back when this was launched in 2021, there was some uproar. So the system was designed to be deactivated in 2022, but that's been delayed until now. They have changed some of the ways that identity is verified to avoid some of the concerns about just privacy in general. But this whole process is designed to help you and your clients secure your accounts within the IRS records. So again, shout out to Tax Twitter and Phyllis for the heads up on that. And I believe that's it for the technical update. Again, I wanted to keep it light. I'm hoping a lot of you are joining us from the beach or the mountains or the lake or someplace fun and relaxing today. If you are, just drop it into the Q&A and let us know where you are.
Well, Lisa, some have let us know there are people on the beach. So,
Awesome.
So let's now. This is kind of. I mean, this. I don't know if this is a beach topic, but let's bring Jason Stats up. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Eric. This can be a beach topic, I think.
There
I think
you go.
it can be. It can be an artificial beach.
Artificial beach, yeah.
Well, Jason, it's great to have you on the town hall. Jason is somebody that, if you don't know him, you should get to know him. Jason Statz, he's a CPA. He sold his firm. He's the founder of Realize, and he's a subject matter expert on many things, one of those being artificial intelligence. Clearly, he's an expert on technology. Jason is playing a role with us in the Startup Accelerator, and actually, Jason's working on a project with us, CPA.com, related to really thinking about ChatGPT's impact on the profession in finance and accounting. So what we're going to do here, Lisa, is we're going to kick off this discussion. We're going to, this is something we'll be talking more about. So Jason, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to share related to your background.
No, that's a great intro. Thanks, Eric. And yeah, happy to be here and talk AI and kind of the goods and the bads that are coming with it.
All right, well, Lisa will be part of this discussion as well. So let's just kick things off. I don't know if some people right now, if I looked at our chat, were saying, what is ChatGPT? So why don't you give a little bit of an overview on that and then talk about some of these different AI models.
Yeah, so ChatGPT, I think if there's an analogy to be drawn here, it's maybe AI's iPhone moment. It's one of the first times that I think most of us came in direct touch with AI in a meaningful way. ChatGPT, historically, it is the fastest growing ever application to 1 million users. The previous record was TikTok, which took 3 or 4 months or something like that. Not sure if that's a good omen or not. Yeah. But a ton of people are using it, and it's kind of kicked off this whole discussion around AI. But bigger picture, there's actually hundreds of thousands of different AI models out there. And I don't know about you, Eric and Lisa. I probably couldn't count on more than 4 fingers how many AI models I know by name. But they're growing really fast. It's one of those things that's probably going to impact the ways that we work. So cruising through this slide here, the big mainstream one that people are talking about that's got the headlines, it's ChatGPT. And that is fundamentally a text generation model where you send it a prompt and it effectively continues that text. Based on what you told it, it says kind of what it thinks you want to hear next. And that turns out to be really useful in a bunch of applications, some of them in really startling ways. OpenAI announced their newest model about a month and a half ago, and they capped off the announcement live stream by saying, we're now going to prepare somebody's taxes with this. And there were a lot of caveats to it and things it will do and won't do, but obviously it's just something to be aware of. Another type of AI model we're seeing a lot of is text to image. And so that is being able to put in a prompt and generating imagery based on that prompt. Speech to text, actually a really big one. We've had kind of auto captions for quite a while, but the quality of this has gotten way better. And where this could be really impactful is actually working with people who speak different languages. You can now have almost these live transcriptions to enable better communication cross-culturally. And then last, image to text. This is something that is particularly interesting to me. It's the ability of an AI model to understand what it's looking at. And that becomes particularly powerful when you think about a ChatGPT-like experience that can see your desktop or your browser, or the apps that you use, and understand what's happening there. So if you think about comparing something like this with, RPA, robotic process automation, we've been talking a lot about the last few years. If it can see and understand what's on screen and then help set up automations and take actions with kind of that semantic chat type experience, that could be a really exciting development.
Well, Jason, one thing that is interesting is we've talked about a lot of technology triggers over the past decade. I mean, a decade ago, it might have been more than that, the cloud, and then you've had blockchain, and now AI has been happening for a moment. I like this, analogy. Maybe it's the iPhone moment for AI. But at the early stages, you're always digging into the insides of the technology, the text generation, the image to text. But what we're going to get into now is, how it's applied, the application. So that's just, I think, just for the community here, sometimes it can even be overwhelming here, understanding all of the how behind it. But what, it's important for the town hall community is to understand the application and how it's going to change if a practice management system, an accounting system, or a tax system.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, where you're probably going to bump into this stuff every day is in the applications that we use. So to talk through a few examples, some situations where we're going to be running into this more and more. The accounting ledger is a big one. Accounting ledgers today are really rules-based. Classification generally happens based on the rules that you create, which is reliant upon us creating those rules well and actually following through on them. I think what we're going to see through the lens of accounting ledgers is more of that classification being done on an automated basis, but also in a more intelligent way that pulls in additional context, like invoices and receipts, and even things like organizational email. If someone gets an email confirmation about something, I think we'll see a more kind of intelligent pulling together of all that information in order to classify things in a more helpful way. Big one I'm excited about is how it enables our practice management systems. A couple examples are just vastly improved search, the ability to search organizational email, team chat, meeting transcriptions, the actual contents of the files in your file storage system, all from a single search experience. That's going to be really powerful. I know one way folks are using ChatGPT right now is to help them craft, email replies in a helpful tone, where sometimes that can be a challenge. I think generative email inside of your practice management system could even be really valuable. If you think about all the information your practice management system has, that's projects, that's files, that's email history. And for it to be able to propose kind of a suggested initial reply, even just as a starting point for how you're going to send that reply to a client, that could be really powerful. But that generative stuff could even go as far as generating documents and files. So if a client emails you asking for a banker letter and you've got 200 examples of similar banker letters in your file system, that system has enough information to give you a pretty solid head start on what that document ought to look like, rather than just building that thing from scratch each time.
So Jason, are we months away from that? Are we years away from that? What's the timeline?
Generative email, I talked with the practice management system yesterday who will have that out by the end of this month. So it's the sort of thing that we're going to have in our hands pretty quick. Some of the bigger stuff around doing more meaningful things with all of the data that's already in that system, that's going to be a little bigger of a lift. But realistically, this is all within the next 12 months kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jason, I'm hearing, what you're talking about right now, just the generative AI to do email answering, to write a blog, to put together some marketing package. It's interesting that that's here today, and it's in some ways the things that you're hearing about online, where doing the tax work or doing some more complicated transactions. ChatGPT sometimes gets it wrong, but when you're using it in this practice management fashion, where you're just going to do a final edit on it, it's the level of complexity or where it needs to be is just different.
Yep. Yeah, the quality is much better because it's only ever going to be as good as the context that it knows. ChatGPT is just pulling from the web. So the more contextual it gets, the more helpful it is.
And just tell them a little bit, ChatGPT 4, so that people are hearing, you see some examples. It's on the earlier version. So give the audience here a little bit of rundown of what does ChatGPT 4 mean?
Yeah, so ChatGPT is just a chat interface. And behind that are multiple different models. The newest model that you've probably heard about is called GPT-4. And right now, the only way to get access with that is with a paid subscription to ChatGPT. It's a big improvement over the previous model, which was GPT 3.5. You can use that previous one for free still, but that fourth version is going to be a little more powerful. And
what content has it scrolled?
More the web, something like a third of the entirety of the web. So it's a really an unfathomably large volume of information that it draws on to complete those text generations.
So Jason, one of the things that we've talked about is that ChatGPT was only current up to a particular date.
Yeah.
What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so the models are trained up until September of 2021, but they've actually have in early access a plugin for ChatGPT that can browse the web. So similar actually to what Bing does now is that when you prompt it, it'll pull, the top 10 highest scoring results from web search and then scrape those web pages and marry that information with the response that it would have otherwise given to kind of marry current events with that larger model.
I personally, I'm sorry, Eric, real quick. I haven't been able to get access to ChatGPT because every time I try, it's busy. I get locked out and, pushed to the back of the line. So I've just been playing around in Bard and, just helping me write things or helping me pull together information on, let's say, how to drive employee engagement in a remote environment. And it gives you a great list. Or what's the impact of these generative AI models on the accounting profession. So if you want to just play around and try to figure out what all we're talking about, and you can't get to ChatGPT, you can take a look at Bard, B-A-R-D.
Yep.
Lots of questions are coming in. Lots of questions. So I don't know if everybody's at the beach that's bringing all these questions into us. Just can we trust AI, generating work products from other client products, all kinds of issues here. So with great power comes great responsibility. Why don't you, respond to some of these questions that you don't see, but you probably can feel.
I've heard them, and they're all good questions. I mean, so ultimately there's a question of accountability. You are still accountable for the output. And that's always been a value of what we provide in the credential and all of that. And it's honestly why accountants are actually well suited to lean into this stuff, is we already have the technical review framework to ensure the output is correct. So it's ultimately not a replacement for accountability. From a security standpoint, a lot of the best practices here are going to be the same. Don't disclose things unnecessarily. Don't give a program more information than it needs. Anonymize where possible. So for example, under GDPR rules, anonymized information isn't personal information. So some kind of best practices there. The one difference that you want to understand with AI models is, are the prompts training the model? And in some cases, the answer will be yes. In some cases, the answer will be no. So for example, today, ChatGPT prompts train the model. They use the prompts that people submit to make that model better. So that changes the type of stuff you would want to put in there. But the GPT API, that is how developers use that same language model right now, prompts sent through there do not train the model. So that API call is genuinely just, it's no different than making an API call to an accounting system. There's no aspect of retention of information there. So kind of like all the other apps that we use, you got to do some due diligence on what does data retention look like, keeping plugged into those policies and making sure that that data is not going anywhere that it shouldn't go.
And, the value add that we provide that Jason mentioned is, you could throw a complex question into one of these models and get back a response. But if you haven't asked it all of the right questions, you're going to be missing a lot of the context that you need to complete the analysis and to, give your client the right advice in this particular circumstance. So context, I think, is really important. And just to reiterate Jason's point about accuracy, you still have to verify the accuracy of the information that's being produced through the model.
Well, Lisa, that's a great segue here because, this, like many other technologies, it's about how you manage it. And that's what the clients are looking for firms to do, is to help them manage complexity, help provide them advice. And I'll tell you, a lot of people right now are saying, wow, this is complex. Everybody's going to start getting their arms around it more and more. But let's just kind of share. And I say this is going to be a continuing discussion with the town hall community. But Jason, let's leave them with a few takeaways.
Yeah, it's too early to say for sure all the ways AI will impact us. But best practices honestly aren't too different than best practices with past tech changes we've seen. Mm-hmm. Always be looking for greater specificity in what you do. The more general the work, that's going to be the stuff that's automated quickest. Think about product leadership, your tech partners. It's fair to ask questions of them. How are you leaning into AI? How will this impact the way that we work with our apps? But then ultimately, I mean, if you really want to turn this narrative on its head with your clients and the way that you work, just learn about it. You know, just like anything else, become an expert in it. Everybody's being impacted like this, just like we are in our profession. And if you can actually then spin that into an advisory opportunity where you're actually helping clients better understand this stuff and show that you're actually leaning into it, then I think you really mitigate the risk of ever being displaced by something like this.
And I'll just add to that, go have some fun with it right now, and just play around in the sandbox. Ask it, you know, to help you write a blog about something and continue to refine your prompts. That's something I've learned from watching Jason do that on his videos, is ask it a different question, ask it the right tone. Just go have some fun with it for now. And it's going to develop, to Jason's point, probably pretty quickly, but keep an open mindset and go play around, have some fun right now.
Yeah, I mean, at Digital CPA, we did that. We did that with Aaron Harris on stage. And Aaron asked it to write a few poems, and it did a great job with that. I think just, you know, when you broadly, the top comment we have here, AI won't replace accountants. Accountants leveraging AI will replace accountants not leveraging AI. Jason's points here of, you know, it's going to continue to drive, you know, additional specialization without a doubt. And the reason when you think about that is because, you know, one of the fundamental value drivers of the accounting and profession is the outsourcing of these tasks from a business to the accountant. And they're outsourcing things. And then when you outsource things, you're always looking for greater and greater specialists, where the business wants to focus on their business and they want, you know, someone to help them with their finances, help them with a lot of advisory type of decisions. And we just finished tax season, if you look at the do-it-yourself tax market, that is flat in many ways. And the growing market is assisted tax. And it could be assisted tax with some AI input, or obviously with CPAs. So I think this is just another, it's an exciting time. And this one does feel different though, Jason, in some ways. I think this is like blockchain. I remember blockchain, it came out, I was, you know, 7 years ago at a conference, people said, hey, it's just time to wrap up the accounting firm. There'll be no more audits. Well, Look at this. I mean, it has not replaced the audit function. So
yeah, it's hard to delineate between kind of those past things, but this one, it is different, I think, in that it's faster. And so like if you can maintain agility and keep plugged into what's happening, I think you'll be just fine.
Well, Jason, stay with us. Let's bring, we're going to go to open forum. And Lisa, let's both you and I look. We got tons of questions coming in here. So maybe I'm going to kick it off with one for Rachel, the R&D credit. What's the latest there?
So the latest on the R&D credit is that they are still looking for a vehicle or a bill that is a must-pass legislation to go through Congress, that then they can attach the Section 174 language to. There continues to be a lot of bipartisan support for Section 174, but the issue is just the cost of it, and then finding some other larger moving bill that this language could be included on.
Well, I'll jump, Lisa, I'll let you jump in right after this. We have 60 ChatGPT questions that just came in. So you watched a little bit of the tax return, kind of trying to do it using ChatGPT for that. Why don't you comment a little bit on that, Jason?
Yeah, so what they did was they gave a real simplistic example using 2018 tax rules, because the model's only trained up through September 2021. If you're a tax pro, you know there's a lot more that goes into it than that. Do I have complete information? There's the follow-up questions you need to ask that probably only a professional knows how to ask. That being said, it's all very impressive. And I think ultimately what I'm most excited about is what that technology looks like inside the framework of an accounting firm, where you already have a process for doing technical reviews and ensuring that the output is correct. So on the consumer side, it seems to me today like it's a bit away, but as a tool for professionals, I am excited about that.
Well said. Lisa?
Someone wants to know where my bicycle is, so I'm not at home. So I'm using the virtual backdrop today, but I'm glad y'all missed the bicycle. Another common question is Jason going to come back on the town halls? So the answer to that is yes. Right, Jason?
Sure.
And then just lots of questions about, how some of the new applications that are kind of leveraging this AI model. There's one called Muse tax software that I read about yesterday in the Wall Street Journal. Is that going to impact the typical tax professional? And I think this is a developing technology. There's a lot to learn about it, and there's still refinements to make. But we'll see, where things go pretty quickly. But open to your thoughts, Jason.
Yeah, ultimately, everyone will be impacted by AI in some way. I mean, the best thing we can do is ensure we're plugged in so that nothing takes us by surprise. And it's one thing to change, and it may mean we have to change some aspects of what we do. It's another thing to be surprised and displaced by change. So it's a wave that's much bigger than any of us. It's to be honest, it's anyone's guess where we're going to be on it 12 months from now. But today it's just a matter of what can I do today, what can I do tomorrow, and keeping plugged into what's happening.
Well, yeah, well said. And, Mark, as you're looking at this and thinking about how you're advising the firms, I do know one thing. If ChatGPT was out and running when the CARES Act came out, we would definitely have leveraged it to kind of do a fast read for us and kind of answer some of those more technical questions. But a couple of questions came in. Just how do I go about learning this? How do I go about kind of thinking about this for my firm? So I'll give you that question, and then we're going to kind of move to closing remarks.
Yeah, I think there's a number of firms we're seeing this, and this is the beauty of, I think, diversity of size of practice. We have some of our larger firms that have started to use ChatGPT. They're finding ways to incorporate it in, especially on the marketing side. I think Jason's comments of the things that are static and more generalized are easier to do. So creating blog posts and the like, and so they're sharing that information with the smaller firms to be able to do that. I don't know if it's on the agenda for Engage or not in June, but I think the more that you can learn about it, and again, those communities that you can be involved in to find out how other people are using it becomes really valuable.
That's a great tip for me to say, hey, Jason, you're going to be engaged, aren't you?
I am. We're running an automation talk, and the more we've written it, the more it's skewed towards AI. So we'll definitely have some AI content in there.
As I said, we're running a project. We might even be doing a special AI symposium this year. It won't just be ChatGPT, but that's clearly a focus. So, hey, this was an energetic hour with Jason, you, and Mark, and Rachel. So thank the three of you. Lisa and I are now going to have some closing remarks, but look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks for being on today.
Thanks.
And as we're going to the closing slides, if the link for the digital asset letter isn't working for you, we'll make sure we've got that in the follow-up newsletter that comes out next week. And also, we've got a Journal of Accountancy article on using ChatGPT and Excel to create formulas. So that'll be in the newsletter next week as well.
Okay, well, thanks. Here's our in summary points. This is the resource slide that Lisa and I mentioned earlier. Just a lot of tools here to help you assess where you are with the CAS practice, to get some introduction information. And we also have a benchmark survey, which is available, and you can download that. And these are information sources that we also will highlight in the newsletter. So you've got the on-demand town halls. I know many of you are taking advantage of that. Here we are, Lisa, marching to 100. The 97th one was high energy. I know these next three are going to be high energy. We've got an exciting program coming to you on May 4th with Tom Hood and Dan Hood from Accounting Today, and Sue will be on, and there'll be an interview with a CFO. We've got Steve Leisman coming May 18th, who actually is on the morning Squawk Box, and he's going to help unpack where rate hikes and the economy is going. And then Lisa will all be together at Engage for the 100th edition.
It's going to be a great few weeks. Looking forward to it.
So thank you for being with us today. Glad a lot of you are relaxing somewhere. Look forward to being with you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for your participation. You can now subscribe to the AICPA Town Hall series on your favorite podcast platform, as well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.